I can write very, very, very fast.
Some of the episodes have taken years and some have taken weeks.
The whole thing about rewriting, I used to hate it. I still hate it. Make sure you get to the end of what you're doing, or an end of what you're doing. Black Mirror came about because we'd done Dead Set, and so Shane at Channel 4 and Channel 4 generally said, what else would you like to do? And I said, well, I was always a fan of The Twilight Zone and Tales of the Unexpected and shows like that, and I felt that there weren't many shows of that nature being made today. And the technology aspect came in sort of relatively late, didn't it?
It was a sort of a modern-day Twilight Zone. So talking about modern themes, I think technology was always going to be one of them. But then I think when we started to explore it, you sort of, oh my God, there's so many things here that feel influenced or, things have changed so dramatically through technology. We should sort of embrace that a little bit more.
Generally, what we do is we explore what happens when a normal, flawed human being is given some sort of immense power by technology. It's clearly inspired by shows like The Twilight Zone or Tales of the Unexpected, but where they would use the supernatural to make something unusual happen, we use technology. It's almost like somebody has discovered a superpower in some ways. So we've got episodes where you can rewind and replay your memories, which is almost like a supernatural power. Or we've got stories in which technology is kind of imposing power on everybody else. It's created a sort of fairly warped but logical system, and people are trying to struggle with the ramifications of it. I'm often asked, are you anti-technology? Are you anti-progress? And I'm definitely not. I'm scared of everything. So that's I basically am a really anxious worrier. I would worry about the downside of almost anything.
Right.
The only thing that stops me being the sort of person who's a doomsday prepper is I'm lazy.
Usually, though, what happens is I'm just thinking of what strikes me as a fairly goofy what-if idea, quite a popcorn sort of what-if idea. And then I extrapolate from there. And sometimes what that means is when you're thinking about that, you think, okay, well, that chimes in with this thing that's in the ether at the moment. That's a thing that's in the news or in people's minds. And then it takes on an extra layer of resonance. So if that happens, that's great. It will be sparked by an observation, but it's not. I don't tend to look at the news. Quite often there's two ideas that have been knocking around and they collide. So there was one, San Junipero was one of those, where there was sort of two separate ideas that we'd been kind of worrying away at and couldn't quite often, that's the other thing, is quite often you go, I know that I've had this idea, I can't quite work out how to make it work, and suddenly you think of what you should do that would be a better thing to do. And then sometimes we go, what haven't we done? We haven't done a musical, or we haven't done we keep going, we haven't done a Western. And so sometimes that is a useful way of going, what's the Black Mirror version of a haunted house story? What's the Black Mirror version of a period drama and things like that? And that often kicks up a lot of ideas. Because all the Black Mirror ideas always make me laugh when we're first discussing them. I'll go off and write up the story over probably about 3-4 pages, depending, sometimes longer. Then we'll discuss it. Then we send that off to Netflix. Then we discuss it again with them. Then I start writing the script. And then I'll start changing it and apologising. Generally speaking, I've got a lot better at planning, which I never used to do. I used to just try and write scripts as I went along. And which sometimes works, but more often than not, I'd end up in terrible trouble having to rewrite something at the last minute. So if I'm in planning mode, that's generally conversational, and you don't do actually much writing. You're just chatting through the idea with whoever is nearby, or often with me, it's often with Annabel Jones, who's co-showrunner on Black Mirror. And then I have to write an outline, which I hate doing. That's my least favourite thing, is writing the outline version of something. Because it's like you know what you want to do, and someone's making you explain it in detail before you do it. So you just start making it up. I tend to write, if I know what it is I've got to do, because I've got the outline and someone has greenlit it and I know it's definitely going to happen, I can write very, very, very fast. What happens is I will do the first draft, and again, the other thing is you have to as long as you get to the end of the first draft, you have to forget how rubbish it is, and you just write things that are filler, basically, a lot of the time, because you just need to get to the end. Try to make yourself do it. Because you will constantly be thinking, this is not very good, or this isn't going right, or this is difficult. Just do the bits you can do. Make sure you get to the end of what you're doing, basically, or an end of what you're doing. Don't try not to leave things just half finished. Try and get to the end, because you might find that in doing so, you solve all sorts of problems, or at least when you walk away and go back, you immediately see what's wrong. And the second time you do it, it's a lot faster and more enjoyable because you know kind of what you're doing. So you have to mentally trick yourself into just getting through the first draft of things. Generally, when writing things, what I try to do is just describe what I'm seeing in my head. If you say, imagine I'm watching the finished product, and describe what I think it should look like. If you find yourself watching a little film in your head and you enjoy it, and so you start, it does feel a bit like automatic writing, and you can write really quickly. And other times other times it's very difficult and it takes ages, and you just have to remember that the first version of it is going to be shit, and it doesn't matter, you've just got to keep going. San Junipero, a good example where I'd written a short story treatment, and it was a man and a woman, and the reveal was, oh, they're old people.
Yeah.
That was sort of the extent of it. And it ended at the point where one of them meets the other one in real life and sees that they're sort of in a paraplegic. That was the ending. Then I was sort of thinking, well, and they were going to get married in it, but isn't this more interesting if they're getting married? What if we make it a same-sex couple? They can get married in 1987, which wasn't possible in 1987, and that in itself is sort of more interesting. I started writing the script from this sort of rough outline I got, and when I got to the point where they meet in real life in the script, I thought, I'll keep going then. I don't want it to stop here. What happens when they do get married then? And I never used to believe it when people would say, I started writing a scene and the characters just did this and I didn't know where it came. I used to think, you liar. But that's what happened. So there's a scene where Kelly and Yorkie have a kind of confrontation, and you find out what is going on in what's Kelly's deal, basically, why she doesn't really want to put roots down in San Junipero, and about her backstory with her husband and daughter. And that kind of just came out in one, and I don't think that really changed at any point. And it was sort of like, it's one of the most powerful moments in the episode. So San Junipero, for instance, in that there is a big twist that becomes apparent about sort of 2/3 of the way through. So for 2/3 of it, I'm withholding information. And that's actually quite a useful restriction to have when you're writing it, because it actually defines a lot of the choices you're making. So you're not just staring at a blank page. There's only this much wriggle room for what you can say that they're doing. And every line that they say has to make sense, like on the broader reality of that they are two old women, basically, in secret. With the first draft, usually I'll send it straight to Annabel, who will pick it the fuck apart in a way that you can't help but get really defensive. She'll be going through things and saying, I didn't like this bit, and so on and so forth. And either I'm going, well, yes, okay, well, it's very first drafty, or it's, you're completely exposed and you're sort of going, I know. Well, what else? What else should be there? And then you usually think of a solution. Sometimes in defending something, you think of a better way to do it, or it solidifies what you thought. It's a sort of unpleasant process you have to go through, but it always makes things better.
Some of the episodes have taken years and some have taken weeks to develop. Sometimes where you can spend months in a room breaking the story. It's incredibly complex and lots of things going on, and you're trying to follow a procedural, but at the same time there's so many different themes going on and plot points, and all of that. Often the skill is in trying to streamline and to strip out ideas and just to hold on to the core elements, and that's, I think, can take the longest time.
The whole thing about rewriting, taking notes on a script, no one wants to do it. I used to hate it. I still hate it. No one likes it. It's awful, but it is probably more than half the job, is getting feedback from people and being annoyed and defensive, and then having to go away and simmer for a bit and then think, fuck, they're right. There's like nothing worse. Again, somebody else described it much better than me, but they said it's a bit like
they're like a patient going to see the doctor. They might be going, my leg hurts, my leg really hurts. Doesn't mean you saw the leg off. They're just saying, I've noticed a problem, and your job is not to deny it, but to work out how to make it better, basically. So it might be that they might be going, I don't like this character, and it might be that actually the problem is something else, but you shouldn't just dismiss what they're saying out of hand. People who are starting out, the only times in your career as a writer that you'll get to write whatever you want are at the beginning and at the end if you've had lots of success, basically. So at the beginning, you should write just like literally what would you like to read, because from that point on, then you'll be hustling for work and you'll be having to slot into other people's needs and concerns and fucking shopping list of stuff that they want. Whereas if you've marked out a good strident voice for yourself, A, you'll know your own voice better, and B, you might not get a chance to do that for quite a while.
Yeah.
You know, but you're more likely to get there sooner if you've sort of marked that territory.
A lot of Black Mirror stories are very personal. They're very small, personal, with one protagonist, and you're just following their journey. Often the story is very linear and very simple. And I hope that's why they sort of maybe resonate, because it's not about big conspiracies. It's not about, big epic thrillers. It's very personal, small stories. And I hope as a result of that, they just engage people a lot more.
Hey, thanks for watching. Next week's video is going to be on Edgar Wright. Subscribe now so you know when that video drops. In the meantime, here are 2 more videos that I think you'll really enjoy. I'll see you next week.